If you're thinking you can't make games because you don't have enough time, money, or skills, I'm going to show you why embracing constraints could be the most important thing you could ever do coming up. What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Ruswick, and today we want to talk about something that I think is massively overlooked in the indie game development space, and it's really viewed as a negative thing when I think it should be a positive thing. And that's the fact that a lot of us indie developers, we have constraints. Now, we're all over the place, right? Like, we got the full-time indies, we got the indies that are just making games at home while they work a job. We got the indies that are just wondering what they should do or poking around in Game Maker or whatever. So, what are the constraints? Well, the constraints are all over the place. Like, some of it's financial. Like, you can't afford an engine, or you can't afford to buy assets. Some of it is like information, right? Like, you don't have the knowledge you need to push through the engine or learn the stuff or build the game that you want to build. Whatever it is, you got constraints. For me, for a long time, I was really good at programming, but I sucked at art. I was horrible at art, in my opinion. Like, I guess everybody thinks they suck at art at some point, but you know, that was me. And when I got back into game development after like a couple years hiatus working on my marketing company and stuff, I realized, like, okay, I have this constraint that I can't make characters. I don't even want to draw shit because that turns into horrible stick figures. But how can I make a game where I can still make the art for it? And so I tried a bunch of different things. I tried downloading art and using other people's assets, but that worked. I didn't like it. Because the art is the visual stuff that you see, and I didn't like that people would judge my game based on the stuff that they saw rather than the stuff they didn't see, which was all the programming that I did. And I didn't like that my work would be judged on the fact that there was another artist there. So that didn't work for me. Then I started to do simpler, more mechanically driven games. And when I realized that there were mobile games out there, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect, because that was right about the time where the super simple one mechanic mobile games started to take place. Like, I thought that was perfect for me. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try and make a game with no more than 5 basic colors and 5 basic shapes. That was my limit. And what I came up with at that time was a game currently titled Ascension. And it was basically a game where you would tap and drag on the screen, and it would shoot the player object, which was just a triangle, upwards, kind of like a slingshot from Angry Birds, except if you fell, you would die. So you had to kind of keep dragging and shooting this thing up with like a rubber band effect in the air while there was all obstacles all over the screen. And I thought that turned out really well. And it was just basic shapes. Like, I used basic shapes for the spikes on the side. I used basic shapes for these little mine things that were in there. I used basic shapes for these barriers that would come out. And I even used basic shapes for the triangle thing. And it really changed the way that I thought about building games and building stuff in that, because I had taken a constraint that I had, something that was keeping me back. It was holding me back from actually doing this thing that I wanted to do, make games. And it turned it into an advantage. It turned it into something like, oh, I can do this. I can make this. And this was kick-ass. This was awesome. I was really proud of this. And that really changed my perspective, because ever since then, I remember thinking, like, there's no such thing as a constraint. There's no such thing as something that's holding you back from game development. And you see that a lot in game development, right? I can't make games because fill in the blank. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I can't make art. I don't know how to use the engine. Whatever it is, embrace your constraints. Embrace them. You can use it to your advantage. If you don't have enough time, join a game jam. Make like a super simple game in a weekend. If you don't have enough money, use a free engine and say, hey, what can I do with the free version of Construct or whatever? You know, what game can I make with that? If you don't know how to do art, say, what can I make with basic shapes or stick figures? Like, when you embrace constraints, I think that's where real creativity comes from. That's where like the really creative stuff deep inside your subconscious mind comes out, because that's the stuff that really gets us somewhere. When you're trying to be creative and you can literally create anything on the planet, anything at all, like that's just too much. It's too much for your brain to comprehend. But when you have a very specific set of constraints, it's actually much more productive from a creative standpoint. And turns out there's been studies on this. Scientists have actually studied creativity, and they found that people that introduce constraints into their creativity perform better on almost every data point when they're being creative. It's effective from a mental standpoint, but also from an actually getting shit done standpoint. Like I call it GST. That's the formula, get shit done. And that's hard sometimes when your brain's like, yeah, you want to make a game, but you don't know how to use a game engine. Or yeah, you want to make a game, but you don't have art skills. Like you can't get stuck with those barriers. You can't let that stop you. You have to embrace the constraints, right? Like I remember before I even knew how to make video games, one of the first things I did is I made a card game. I drew little pieces of paper out because I played Yu-Gi-Oh at the time and I loved it. And I was like, I played with my brother. I made him play with me. I made up rules. I wrote a whole rule book out on paper, handwritten, and we just played that. I didn't know anything about video games or engines or any of that stuff, and I did that. And that was without me knowing that I should embrace constraints. I knew I wanted to make games, and I didn't let it stop me. And if you're in the same boat, if you're sitting there saying, I can't make games because of blank, you need to take that same constraint and force yourself to make a game with it. Whatever it is, whether it's no engine, no art skills, no money, no time, whatever it is. Turn that into an advantage for you. Build a game with that constraint, and I guarantee you it will change your perspective on how things are done. So that's my thought for today. I hope you guys found it useful. Leave a comment if you have any comments on it, I guess. And once again, I'll see you in the next video.